am Dr. Kartika, Assistant Professor from the Department of Home Science, Fatima College, Madurai. Today, we are going to see about the topic carbohydrate, which is one of the essential macronutrients required for our body. Under the carbohydrates, we are going to see all these contents, that is definition, classification, functions, recommended dietary intake, deficiency diseases, food sources, and also some of the key takeaways. Let's get into the topic. Definition of carbohydrates. So usually carbohydrates are sugars or polymers of sugars such as starch that can be hydrolyzed into simple sugars by the action of digestive enzymes or by heating with dilute acids. These carbohydrates are the organic macronutrients which is composed of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen atoms. The general molecular formula is CnH2ON. Literally, it is carbon plus water, which is why they are also called as saccharides or hydrates of carbon. Next, coming to the classification of carbohydrates. So, the classification are monosaccharides, disaccharides, oligosaccharides and polysaccharides. First, we'll see monosaccharides. So, what are monosaccharides? Monosaccharides are simple sugars with single sugar unit. Example is glucose, which is present in the blood, fructose, which is a fruit sugar, galactose, which is a milk sugar, and ribose, which is a sugar present in our DNA and RNA. And this disaccharides, these two monosaccharides joined by using the glycosidic bond, that is called as the disaccharide. Example for this disaccharides, sucrose, which is a combination of glucose and fructose, lactose, which is a combination of glucose and galactose, maltose, which is a combination of two molecules of glucose. Coming to the oligosaccharides. Oligosaccharides is nothing but 3 to 10 monosaccharide units combined to form an oligosaccharide. Example, raffinose, which is present in pulses or legumes, stachyose, which is present in beans, and fructo-oligosaccharides, which is a prebiotic. Usually prebiotic, we all know that this is a non-digestible carbohydrate which stimulates the growth of the gut bacteria. And next one is the maltodextrins, which is also produced by the partial hydrolysis of starch. So these are all some of the oligosaccharides. And next one is the polysaccharides. Polysaccharides contains more than 10 units of monosaccharides, and it's also a long chain monosaccharides combined. So this usually polysaccharide in plants is called as the starch, which composed of amylose and amylopectin. And in animals, this is in the form of the glycogen, which is a branched glucose. And this cellulose is another polysaccharide which is considered as a plant fiber, and this contains 1,4-glycosidic bonds. And next one is the chitin, which is a polysaccharide present in the fungi and crustaceans. Next, coming to the functions of carbohydrate, and the major function of carbohydrate is it provides more energy. That is, we all know that 1 gram of carbohydrate provides 4 kilocalorie of energy. So the carbohydrates are the most preferred fuel for our body. They are metabolized faster than fats or protein and directly fuel the muscles, organs and the brain through glycolysis pathway. So this glycolysis pathway is nothing but the glucose is broken down into 10 enzymatic steps to produce 2 ATP, 2 NADH and 2 pyruvic acid. So under aerobic condition, this pyruvate enters the Krebs cycle yielding 36 to 38 ATP in total. And the next most important function of carbohydrate is it's involved in the oxidation of fat. Yes, carbohydrate is essential for oxidation of fat. If adequate amount is not consumed, intermediary products of fat oxidation gets accumulated, which will provide a condition called ketosis. And next, coming to the protein sparing action. If adequate carbs intake is not there in the body, then it prevents the protein from being catabolized for energy. So preserving it for growth, enzyme synthesis and immune function. Next one is the glycogen storage. Yes, glucose is stored in the form of the glycogen by a pathway called glycogenesis that is stored mainly in the liver and the skeletal muscles for rapid energy release when needed. And next important one is this carbohydrates acts as a fuel for the brain. It consumes 120 grams of glucose per day and cannot directly oxidize fatty acids under normal conditions. And this glucose is very important for the functioning of the cognitive function. Next, coming to the important function, that is it acts as a backbone for the genetic material. Yes, ribose forms the backbone of RNA, deoxyribose forms the DNA backbone. Without these carbohydrates, hereditary information cannot be stored or transmitted. Then coming to the cell recognition and signaling. Glycoproteins and glycolipids on cell surfaces acts as recognition markers. ABO blood group antigens are oligosaccharides. These carbohydrate antennas mediate cell-to-cell communication and also involved in immune responses. Then this carbohydrate is also essential for lubrication and protection purpose. Mucopolysaccharides such as hyaluronic acid, which lubricate the joints, protect the gastric lining and form the vitreous humor of the eye. Heparin, a polysaccharide, acts as an anticoagulant. This carbohydrate is also essential for the cell wall structure. Cellulose, which provides the structural rigidity to all plant cell walls. Chitin, which forms the exoskeleton of insects and cell walls of some fungi. Then peptidoglycan, which contains sugar, strengthen the bacterial cell walls. The carbohydrate, that is especially the polysaccharide, that is dietary fiber, is the soluble fiber which is present in all the fruits, especially pectin, guargum, which is present in the fruits, lowers the blood glucose and slows down the glucose absorption. Insoluble fibers like cellulose, lignin add bulks and speeds the transit, prevents the constipation and reduces the colorectal cancer risk. Next, coming to the biosynthetic precursors, yes, carbohydrates provide carbon skeleton for the synthesis of all essential and non-essential amino acids, fatty acids, nucleotides, and some vitamins. So usually glucose will be converted into pyruvate, pyruvate will be converted into acetyl-CoA, and it feeds for the many biosynthetic pathways. So these are all some of the important functions of the carbohydrates. Next, coming to the recommended dietary intake. So usually 45 to 65% of the total daily caloric intake should come from the carbohydrates. So this is varied according to the age groups. Example, if you take the children, they require 130 grams per day. If it's you're an adolescent, 130 to 200 grams, which is essential for the active growth phase. And also for the adult men, they require 225 to 30 to 325 grams based on the 2000 to 2500 kilocalorie diet. So if the diet contains 1800 to 2200 kilocalorie, then that adult women should consume 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrate. So in the pregnancy, still it increases, and minimum requirement during pregnancy is 175 gram. And during pregnancy, this carbohydrate is very essential for the fetal brain development. And in the elderly also, it is very important. And the fiber intake usually in the elderly, more than the simple sugars, fiber intake is very important. And here, if you see that if the total percentage of carbohydrates required for a human adult is 45 to 65 percentage, then only 10% should come from the free sugars and the remaining percentage should come from the complex carbohydrates. That is the important one we should have in our mind. Next, coming to the deficiency diseases of carbohydrate. First one, we can see about the hypoglycemia, which is nothing but the low blood glucose level, that is less than 70 milligram of glucose in the blood is called as the hypoglycemia. The cause for this hypoglycemic condition is carbohydrate starvation, excessive insulin secretion, prolonged fasting, alcohol in excess consumption. Then what are all the acute symptoms we can see? Sweating, trembling, palpitation, dizziness, confusion and blurred vision. And some of the serious symptoms are seizures, loss of consciousness and finally it enters into coma. And the next deficiency disease is kwashiorkor. This is nothing but a severe protein energy malnutrition is very common in the children. That is the major cause for this kwashiorkor is diet very high in starchy carbs but extremely low in protein. And this is usually in the endemic areas in developing regions. And the signs are pitting edema, pot belly, moon face appearance, and other symptoms are skin lesions, hair discoloration, growth retardation, and fatty liver. So usually the age at risk for this kwashiorkor is 1 to 5 years. So usually during this infancy stage they used to suffer from this kwashiorkor, especially after weaning on to starchy gruel. And next deficiency disease is marasmus. So severe overall caloric deficiency, that is due to the insufficient carbohydrate, protein and fat. The cause for this is total food deprivation, extreme famine, child neglect, severe chronic illness. Then signs of this marasmus are wasting of muscles, that is extreme loss of muscles and fat, and weight will go less than 60% of the expected weight for that age. And the appearance will be, they used to have the shrunken eyes and the skins will be very loose and wrinkled, ribs clearly visible. And when compare this marasmus with the kwashiorkor, no edema is here. The child is alert only, but he or she may be very weak and irritable. Next deficiency disease is the ketosis or ketoacidosis. So this is nothing but the excess of the ketone bodies like acetone, acetoacetate, beta hydroxybutyrate. All these will start accumulating in the blood. The reason for this is very low carb intake will lead to the fat oxidized without adequate glucose. So that will lead to the incomplete fat metabolism. Some of the physiological aspects are mild ketosis during fasting or starvation is the body's survival adaptation. And pathological, this diabetes ketoacidosis, which is very dangerous, that is drop in the blood pH which is less than 7.35, and this one is a very life threatening one. And some of the symptoms for this ketoacidosis are fruity breath because of the presence of the acetone in the blood, and nausea, vomiting, fatigue and confusion. Coming to the food sources, and carbohydrates, usually it's grains and vegetables are rich sources of this carbohydrate. And some of the grains and vegetables I have mentioned here: rice, brown rice, wheat or bread, oats, maize or corn, barley, ragi, jowar, sorghum. And in this starch and root vegetables, all the potato, sweet potato, yam, cassava, beetroot, green peas, lotus root, even plantain are the rich sources of carbohydrate. And coming to the fruits, fruits usually contain the direct sugars. Banana, which is high in the glucose and fructose. Mangoes, where the fructose sugar is dominant. Apple, the fructose and also the soluble fiber pectin is present. And grapes, which contains a high glycemic index, that is a combination of glucose and fructose is present. And dates, which is a high natural sugar. And jackfruit is also rich in carb rich nutrient and also in meaty texture. Coming to the dairy products and legumes, whole milk, yogurt, lentils or dal, chickpeas, beans, soy milk, all these are the rich sources of carbohydrate. And sugars and sweeteners, of course, all these are the direct sugars. So table sugar, honey, jaggery, maple syrup, corn syrup, molasses, all these are the rich sources of carbohydrate. Then we can just have a look into the simple carbohydrate versus complex carbohydrate. So first, if you see the structure of the simple carbohydrate, it contains only 1 to 2 sugar units with short chains. Whereas in complex carbohydrates, long chains of more than 10 sugar units combined. The chain may be branched or unbranched. And coming to the digestion of simple carbohydrate, It's rapidly digested and absorbed into the bloodstream, whereas this complex carbohydrates is slowly digested, broken down stepwise by amylases. And what causes in the blood glucose level, that is the simple carbohydrates, it's taken in high quantity, what happens to the blood glucose level is it causes a sharp spike followed by rapid crash. Whereas in complex carbohydrate, this blood glucose level will rise slowly, steady rise will be there, gradual rise will be there, and sustained energy level will be there. And coming to the energy, in simple carbohydrate, quick burst of energy takes place and it only short lasting process. And this complex carbohydrate is a sustained, long lasting energy release will be here. And simple carbohydrates are low in vitamins, minerals, fiber, whereas complex carbohydrates are rich in fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. And some of the examples for simple carbohydrates already we have seen all these sugars like table sugar, honey, candy, white bread, soft drinks, fruit juices. And here if you see the complex carbohydrates, the brown rice, oats, whole wheat, legumes, which contain the outer layer or comes under the complex carbohydrates, sweet potato, vegetables, all these along with the peels. And coming to the health impact of the simple carbohydrate, excess simple carbohydrates will link to the obesity, type 2 diabetes, dental caries, and metabolic syndrome. If this complex carbohydrates is taken, what are the health benefits? It really helps to promote the satiety, supports the gut health, lowers the risk of chronic diseases. And we have seen all the carbohydrate, then definitely we have to see the glycemic index of food because carbohydrates relates to this glycemic index. So what is glycemic index first? It's a ranking of carbohydrate foods from 0 to 100 based on how quickly they rise the blood glucose level after eating these foods. So pure glucose, if you consume pure glucose, the glycemic index will be 100. High glycemic index foods cause rapid spikes, whereas low glycemic index foods cause slow, sustained rises. So glycemic index is usually affected by cooking method, food processing, fiber content, and fat and protein which is present in the foods. I have mentioned some of the low glycemic index foods. So if the glycemic index is less than 55, then those foods can be consumed. It is considered as a healthy foods like lentils or dal with the outer layer, chickpeas, sweet potato which has definitely the low glycemic index, oats, and some of the medium glycemic index. That means the glycemic index comes between 56 to 69. Yes, brown rice, banana, honey, raisins, and these are some of the high glycemic index foods which should be consumed in a very less quantity: white bread, white rice, cornflakes, and baked potatoes. So coming to the end of this session, the key takeaways are: we all know that carbohydrates are organic compounds containing carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and it is classified as mono, di, oligo, and polysaccharides. The primary energy source of the calories comes from the carbohydrates. That is, 1 gram of carbohydrate will provide 4 kilocalories. And definitely carbohydrate intake should be adequate to prevent the protein sparing action. And it also acts as a fuel for the brain. And this carbohydrate plays a major role in the structural forming the structure of the DNA and RNA, and also involved in the cell signaling. And 45 to 65% of daily calories should come from the carbohydrates. That too, nearly 50 to 55% should come from the complex carbohydrates. And minimum requirement of carbohydrate per day is 130 gram. And the fiber requirement should be 25 to 38 gram per day. And next one is the deficiency of carbohydrate is hypoglycemia, kwashiorkor, marasmus, and ketosis. And the major food sources are grains, starchy and root vegetables, fruits, legumes, dairy products, sugars. So choose the whole and minimally processed food sources. And coming to the health impact, complex carbohydrates and fiber fiber. It is essential for the heart health, gut microbiome, weight management, and diabetes prevention. So choose the low glycemic index foods, that is less than 55, for sustained energy. Avoid high glycemic index refined foods regularly. Thank you for your patience listening.